Enabling a secure remote workforce is more critical than ever before. Whether you're issuing more corporate-owned devices or enabling a BYOD program for remote employees, enabling secure and seamless access to authorized apps is a business imperative. And MobileIron is here to help. MobileIron provides unified endpoint and enterprise mobility management for mobile devices, securing nearly 20,000 organizations. Joining us is MobileIron's Director of Product Marketing, Sam Kumarsamy. Sam, thank you so much for joining us. And I want to dive right on in because I do have a question for you. What do you think are the top three, let's say, challenges CISOs and security decision makers are facing right now?
Yeah. First of all, thank you, JD, for giving me this opportunity. And it's my pleasure to be presenting this particular session. And good afternoon, everybody. So a little bit background about myself. My career started at Ernst & Young back in the 1990s in management consulting. And then I progressed in product marketing and business development with a number of large companies such as CA, worked at Cisco, and then a number of VC-funded startups, both in the security and networking space. So my entire career has been in security and networking. So that's a great question, JD. So I can talk about 5 different challenges, but let's try and focus on 3 today. So from a mobility perspective, as you know, with the pandemic very prevalent now, more and more users are working remotely. And it's very important that the users have a choice of end user computing because they're really comfortable. I, for example, am very comfortable with my iPhone and Mac OS. And similarly, I'm sure a lot of other people are just comfortable with Android or Windows PC and so on. So being able to enable users to securely connect using any of their endpoint, the choice of their endpoint, whether it's corporate owned or whether they're bringing their own devices, being able to connect securely and accessing corporate resources as soon as possible is really important because they have to be productive as quickly as possible. Again, the key operative word is to securely access data. In addition to that, it's also important that the corporate data and the personal data are kept separate because from a compliance perspective, it's extremely important to preserve user privacy. It's also extremely important to protect corporate resources because you don't want it falling into the wrong hands. So those 2 are some of the important criteria from a mobility perspective. The other factor is the mobile threats are increasing pretty drastically. When I say mobile threats, especially related to Android and iOS smartphones, for example, there is a 667% increase in phishing emails in the last month alone. In addition to that, did you know that only 0.5% of the budget dollars are spent or allocated towards mobile security versus the traditional endpoint security? So this is really a field day. The hackers are going to have a field day because it's so easy to hack in now because when you don't have defense against mobile threats, especially related to application, device, and network-based threats for your mobile devices, as well as, remember, the phishing is a 0-day threat. You have to have protection, and that's a challenge today. How do you convince people to protect their mobile devices? And it's very important. All the hackers need is one avenue for them to get in. So you might have all the protection you need for your network security and other traditional endpoints, but you really need to consider this as well. And last but not the least is passwords are another source of a point for hackers to get in as well, because 86% of the breaches happen because of lost, stolen, or hacked passwords. So imagine, if I, for example, am doing I access my mortgage payments and I access my banking accounts all using my device, for example, my iPhone. I would be really glad if we find a way to eliminate passwords and somehow be able to log in with just your, just based on biometrics, whether it is my fingerprint or my facial ID and get access securely to all my applications. That'll avoid a lot of pain points for the help desk as well, if you know, because help desk has to reset the passwords every 3 months or 6 months as the cases may be. And if you can avoid that, you can not only improve the end user experience, but also improve their productivity as well.
You outlined some issues that are happening right now. I'm kind of curious, what does your technology do to solve these and help customers along these lines?
Okay, and that's exactly what MobileIron does is we are 100% a pure play in the mobility space, management and security for your endpoints. That's what we focus on. So that's why I call it a pure play. The other thing we do is we have a very mobile-centric security platform that is very flexible. We offer deployment options, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud. So we offer those options based on the customer's budget needs. The budget needs might be CapEx or OpEx. So we service all sorts of customers, from the high-end enterprises to commercial to public to service providers. We are able to provide different options. So let's start with our unified endpoint solution, which is powered by this mobile-centric security platform of ours. So that provides unified console to manage all your endpoints. The varied endpoints I talked about is Android, iOS, Mac OS, and Windows 10 based devices. So across the board, the most popular devices we are able to support. We are able to provide complete device lifecycle management, all the way from onboarding the devices to provisioning the devices, for configuration, apps, approved apps distribution, preventing blacklisted apps or preventing unknown apps from being installed, as well as decommissioning the device, wiping the device if it is stolen or even lost, for example, and then reassigning the device to a new user should an employee or contractor leave the company. We also, I mentioned clearly, from the separation of personal data as well as corporate data. That is extremely important as well, as I mentioned, from a compliance perspective. So we are able to containerize the corporate data so that it's completely protected and the personal data is kept completely separate as well. So it protects user privacy as well as protects your business data. So we achieve that twofold. In addition to that, we also protect data at rest. For example, we provide encryption and we provide access control to the data in motion, which is communicating between your endpoint and your corporate resources. So security is our main focus, and then management of all your devices. Two others, additional layers of security that we provide. One is MobileIron Threat Defense. Using the same agent, remember, using the same agent for UEM, we can, with the click of a button, enable software as a service for your threat defense. So we can protect unknown as well as known threats on your mobile devices by just enabling what we call as mobile threat defense. And the reason we are able to assure 100% adoption is because it's the same agent that protects your we provide UEM, also is enabled through our MTD as well. So again, that is a key differentiator. And last but not the least, in terms of, I just talked about passwordless access. That is something we provide from an authentication perspective, is because we enable you to use your device as your ID. When I talk about device, mobile devices being one option, but also your PCs and laptops as well. You can use that as your ID and eliminate passwords completely by enabling biometrics. So as I mentioned, can be your fingerprint, your facial ID, or perhaps even a QR code, and enables access just through that to all your applications, whether they are on-prem or in the cloud. So I think the combination of all three is what really differentiates MobileIron, and something that we are very proud of as well.
Right, or everywhere type of world. Talk about how you're helping all of that group really combat emerging threats.
Could you repeat that question? You kind of cut off in the last.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, just looking at the working from home group and the working remotely,
Yes.
How are you helping those customers deal with emerging threats?
Absolutely. So I just talked about the mobile threat defense, right? So we provide the threat defense. So if users, so one of the statistics that I would like to talk about is 90% of remote users are not acting securely. Very interesting. And in addition to that, 35% of the hacking into organizations happen because the remote users are not acting securely, right? And the last but not the least is also the fact that 25% of the employees repeat passwords, use the same passwords again and again. So we can, I just talked about two of the threat products that we provide. So the first one is the MobileIron threat defense. Again, we provide protection against all sorts of attacks to your mobile devices. So if the remote users are using their mobile phones to access emails and so on, we ensure that you do not download links to phishing emails, right? It's as soon as you're enabled, the device is enabled, this MTD gets activated and it does a scan of the entire device and ensures from a corporate side you're not accessing any malicious applications, or even an email, if it contains a link, it prevents you from clicking it. Now, did you know even hotels.com, which I use to make bookings when I travel, can be malicious as well, and that has been detected by our MobileIron threat defense as well. So that is how we enable our remote users, whether they are working from the beach, from their home, or maybe perhaps from a coffee shop, we can enable protection as well. And then I talked about passwords. I gave you statistics on passwords. People are repeatedly using the same passwords, and you really want to prevent that, right? And that is where using your device as an ID can prevent end users from being hit by hackers who hack into their passwords, or even preventing stolen passwords. And then a lot of people tend to forget the passwords, especially passwords are getting complex. And if you're asked to change every 3 months, it's very hard because you run out of options as well, right? So imagine the kind of benefits we can have if this becomes the norm. I know people are today using both multi-factor authentication and single sign-on. That is still very secure. But again, a lot of pain for the help desk, if they tend to forget the password. And a lot of end user pain, productivity goes down. And all this can be solved if you can use your device as an ID and use biometrics to sign on to all your applications, because that is much, much more difficult to hack.
Absolutely. You mentioned hotels.com. Can you give me some more case studies where this is in practice?
Yeah, so I'll give you a couple of case studies in terms of the companies that have used our product. So so let me talk about a British luxury car maker called Aston Martin. They are a client of ours. So when they started looking, they have their global network of 160 different dealerships located in 53 countries. So they were looking at a globally scalable solution. And they wanted to enable all their users, whether they are business managers, plant workers, design engineers, or salespeople. They wanted to enable a digital workspace where they enable all sorts of productivity applications such as Slack, Zoom, Office 365, and so on, because those are the applications where they use to become productive, and they collaborate as well amongst themselves globally. They had a diverse fleet of both Android and Apple devices as well. So they wanted to be able to immediately onboard the users, whether they are remote, whether they are on-prem. And this included a mixture of both corporate owned devices as well as bringing their own devices. So they needed that flexibility, and they chose MobileIron. They looked at both our on-prem solution as well as cloud. Then they decided, because they had it was not their core competency to handle this on-prem, because their core competency is selling luxury cars and not hiring IT people. They decided to use our cloud solution, because then they had the scalability, and as they increase the number of employees or dealership and so on, they can quickly onboard all the team pretty quickly because it's all done remotely. And we offered a scalable solution, and they're pretty happy with the way we enabled them and the user experience that they provided. The next step is they already realized that from a mobile threat, that is something that is top of their mind. So the next step is they are evaluating our mobile threat defense solution, the MobileIron threat defense, because they see the need. a lot of their users are remote workers and they see a need for it. So that's something they're looking at. So that is one case study that kind of addresses your question.
Yeah, well, and I'm sure you can go to MobileIron.com and learn a lot more and see some of these case studies. But I do have a question for you. What type of devices does MobileIron work across?
Okay, as I just mentioned, it's important from an end user perspective that, especially given the today's millennial generation, they like to be they're comfortable with certain types of endpoints. So it could be iOS, it could be Android, it could be your Windows 10 device, or it could be your Mac OS. So we enable all four of these different types of operating systems. So it could be your iPad, and we also enable some of the wearables as well. So we are able to include that and provide the kind of enablement that we can do in terms of immediately getting them productive. And what I mean by that is really, as soon as they sign on, based on their user profile, they get pushed all the configuration information, such as VPN, Wi-Fi, or their particular approved applications, be it Slack, be it Office 365, Salesforce for salespeople, and so on. So all this is done pretty automatically based on their user profile and based on their credentials, be it password, PIN, or biometrics.
Yeah, I was going to get there because I was wondering about collaboration tools, and you mentioned Slack and Zoom and others that definitely work with MobileIron. So we do have a question here in the queue. What does not acting securely mean specifically? So that could have a lot of different definitions.
Yeah. So not acting securely is not following company policies and regulations. An example would be, hey, these are the only approved applications. So I can do not acting securely is going to a bad site, malicious site, which downloads a lot of malware, for example. That's not acting securely. Only approved applications you need to download and to use. Don't go into, follow security policies of the company. That's what we say. Of course, when you have our MobileIron threat defense, it prevents you from downloading such apps. But typically, not acting securely is going to even a free movie site, for example, right? There are so many movie sites that compete with Netflix where you don't have to pay. I know I personally have gone to some European sites which has some great movies, European movies which normally you don't get into Netflix. But again, they have a lot of malware that they downloads, and I use it on my personal computer. I don't download it on my work computer. Again, please follow policies, right? Whether it's your laptop or your mobile device. That's what I mean by not acting securely.
Oh, that definitely makes sense. And you mentioned a couple stats that stick to me. The 667% increase in mobile phishing, that surprised me. And then the 86% of breaches come from lost, stolen, hacked passwords. Do you see those numbers continuing to increase?
Absolutely, because I think as more and more devices come on board, because I think an IDC report said the non-IoT devices are supposed to increase today from 12 billion something. And when I talk non-IoT devices, it's both PCs, mobile devices, and wearables as well, including AR and so on. That's supposed to increase to 13 billion. So as more and more devices come on board, it's fantastic when organizations enable supporting all those devices. But let's face reality. The attack surface increases as well. So the hackers are going to have a field day. So unless you protect all these devices, whether it's mobile, whether it's endpoint, your traditional endpoint, absolutely needs protection. And that's why I think the numbers are going to increase till everybody is aware. They're aware, they're security conscious, they're aware of security hygiene, and so on. And it's important, not just from a technology perspective, but the hygiene is in terms of following and educating all the employees and the contractors on the importance of following security policies and regulations. And I think that is key as well. So it's not technology alone, it's enabling the process and the following the policies and rules that are extremely important too.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sam. And I do see we do have a note from Tamara. And I'm going to give everybody homework. So I encourage everybody to go to mobileiron.com/en/events. You see it in the chat window, /CDM CISO Virtual Summit. There's some great case studies in there that I had a chance to read. One with hospital, you mentioned Aston Martin, just great examples of what you guys are doing. So thank you so much, Sam, for joining us today. And it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, likewise. And thank you. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me directly at first name initial, last name Kumarsamy @mobileiron.com.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sam. We'll see everybody in the closing remarks.
Thank you.